Hey everyone, we are back. Welcome to welcome to Rankable. I'm your host as always, Jared Thomas, Senior Account Executive at iPullRank. I'm joined by my lovely co-host and best AM in the game, Chantel Branch.
Hello.
Yes, and we have a special guest today. So for those first time listeners today, so what we've been doing is something special for Women's History Month, and what we wanted to do is get 4 women who inspire us and who have done some really amazing things in their career. We wanted to highlight their story and their journey. So this person who is our guest today is a very close friend of mine, a mentor. She's a global marketing, communications, advertising, brand strategy executive, visionary, multicultural curator with 20 plus years experience building, developing, and leading brands. So she has a career comprised of advertising, marketing, executive C-suite roles at global companies like Facebook, Diageo, Zenio, and Time Warner. I'd like to introduce my good friend, Adrienne A. Wallace. How are you, Queen?
I am doing well. Thank you. That is a lot. And as you were saying what it is that I have done or do, I was just checking, making sure that I still love that stuff. I still love that stuff. So.
No, it's a pleasure to have you. I know you've been a inspiration for me in my personal life. You've been a mentor, and I appreciate everything you've done for me. And I wanted to get you on today just to hear the story and have the conversation so our viewers could know who you are and be inspired by the wonderful things you've done. So if you want to take it from the top, I would love to start from how did you get into? I never asked you this, but how did you get into the industry, Adrienne?
So I think that, first of all, it's interesting how we always say the industry. We are hopefully symbiotic in our relationships, and but we work in different industries. So I have worked in socially propelled industries like the nonprofit space, but I've also worked in the technology space and in the entertainment space and in the media space. So I don't situate myself in an industry. I situate myself in a category. And you've explained my categories. I'm a brand strategist and chief communications officer, chief marketing officer. I arrived initially in the media space because I had a natural interest in media and marketing from my cooperative work experiences as an undergraduate at Drexel University.
Nice. Mm-hmm. Philly.
Now, yes, Philly. So when I went to Drexel University, I went for 5 years and I did 172 credits, which is the equivalent of having a double major anywhere else.
Right.
But 4 of those years in your sophomore, pre-junior, junior, and senior years, you go to work, you get credit for working, and you earn money in real Fortune 200 companies.
Right.
Mm-hmm. So
program. Does that program still exist?
It absolutely still exists. Thank you for asking that. It is a 101-year-old program.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, 101-year-old program. So pre-high technology. Drexel is originally an engineering university in its origination. And so I went there for civil engineering. So Chantel, when we were warming up, we were talking about nails. When I fully realized, I'm super smart at math and science, but when I fully realized that I would have to be subject to being out in the cold and mismanaging my nails, I decided, seriously, I do not want to be a civil engineer. And so I decided at the top of my sophomore year to major in political area studies.
Very nice.
And what that did was it gave me a political science skew around different cultures across the world, understanding globalization, which is something that I think we're not understanding now.
I would love to talk more with you about that at some point in time.
And so but all of my co-ops weren't like public service related or political science related, for lack of a better expression. They were all marketing co-ops. And so I ended up just catching the bug on marketing and media. I had a lot of job offers as I walked out of Drexel University, but I also had an acceptance to the University of Pennsylvania Law School.
Uh-huh.
So I was going to be a fight the power lawyer. I was going to sit up for the fist. Okay.
Yeah.
Fight the power lawyer. And, all the things that I'd become passionate about, had been passionate about even before college, and all of the things that my soul's passion was around, especially as it related to women and social justice for people of color, not just in the United States, throughout the world. That's what I was going to do. And lo and behold, 18 months in, I became really disenchanted with the law and the process and a system that is not just.
Yeah.
And when I looked for leading images, which are men and women who look like me, I found ones that I wasn't really too proud of. They started off as justice and civil rights attorneys, but they had turned the corner and were doing something quite different that was oftentimes in the public eye, or that you could find out in the public domain. And so it became something that I became a bit more disenchanted about. And so it was very easy. It was a very different time than 2021. It was very easy for me to tally back and go get a job. And so that's how I got my start. I had relationships, networking, and all of those things occurred not once I graduated college. It was happening while I was in college.
Right.
And so I landed at Time Warner, and I was there for 6 years, and I grew a group from 18 people to 180 people. I had 6 promotions and probably worked with some of the most brilliant people I've ever worked with. Spatially brilliant, humanely brilliant people. And then I left there and went off to Girls Inc.
Yeah.
And that's how I got my start. So I had a real
You were the youngest CEO?
Yeah.
Weren't you the youngest CEO at that time?
So I was the youngest CEO, and interestingly enough, in the region that I oversaw 18 Girls Inc. The region that I oversaw is here in Connecticut, and the location, one of the locations that I went to office at every day was, or rather is now an historical site. I got that situated. But it's where it started as the Girls and Boys Club of America, probably someplace that our grandparents went to well over 150 years ago.
Wow.
So it's where they went to learn home ec and how to sew and, all those things that is so important for women to know how to do.
It's key, actually.
Right.
As women, we must sew often.
So, well, anyway, I went in there and was like, well, we're not learning how to sew, but we are going to learn chemistry and how to cook.
There we go.
Yeah.
So I was that person. Again, relationships. I had left Time Warner. I had gotten married. I was really, I built a home. I literally had a house built and was looking to take a year off and go into sabbatical. And I was serving on a couple of boards, and I was an advisor on the marketing arm of the board of directors. And lo and behold, they said, would you ever consider? We need someone who's not an executive director. We need someone who's an executive and who is a marketer, because we're in trouble. And so I took it upon myself. And I often say that I feel like I have one angel wing, because it's one of the proudest turns in my career. There are young women now who, are just getting into their 20s, just leaving adolescence. And I get letters from them about their college achievements, or I'm getting married, or, and a lot of them are first in their generation women to do what it is that they're doing. So I feel really good about that. My soul feels well.
Well, that's really great. Beautiful.
Yeah.
I have a question for you about Girls Inc. and the fact that you were pulled off of the board and brought onto like a role. Is it how did you find yourself as a Black woman on a board? Because it's a very rare thing that you see. So
I reached out to Joyce Roche, who was effectively the global CEO of Girls Inc.
Got it.
Unbeknownst to me, she was a year from retiring. And I said to her, I had met her 2 times before at galas and whatnot, at an NAACP gala and at an Empower Me gala. And I reached out to her by email, and I sent a note, and the email said, where do you want me? I said, I'm not on trains, planes, and automobiles anymore. I don't know if you remember when we met, but I certainly remember meeting you.
Right.
And you talking about Girls Inc. It resonates with me. Where do you want me? And she said, the very first, where do you live? And I said, Connecticut. She said, the very first Girls Inc. is in Connecticut, and they are struggling.
And were they struggling from just getting the messaging out, getting people to engage with them? Was it a matter of there was some gaps in the marketing side that they, without any proprietary information, but just
anytime a company is struggling, you hit the nail on the head, Chantel. It's always easy to peel back, and the first layer is about marketing and branding, right? So the name Girls Inc., it was a new name taken on in the late 90s, when I was still very much a girl. And they took on that name, and when you put that name into any given search engine, be it Yahoo or Bing or Google, it just didn't matter. What first came up were porn sites.
I thought that was what you were going to say.
So that was the first thing.
Yep.
So that came, and that impact was an impact on 96 Girls Inc. in the US and Canada, right? Because you could never go further than that. Also, when you looked at different locations in different states and different cities, there was nothing symbiotic. There wasn't a template. There wasn't a way of delivering the messaging. You had different executive directors running the organization within their way. Beyond the strong, smart, bold, how were they living that mission? That story was not obvious.
Franchise, maybe when they really
they definitely operate as franchises reporting up to the greater conglomerate.
Yeah.
So I came in to really say, what really is the story, and then all these executive directors started telling me their stories, and I started saying, I don't actually care about your story, because you're telling me your story, and I want to know the story of the average 10-year-old girl that's inside of a Girls Inc., because that's the Girls Inc. story.
Yeah.
Right. There's a space in time between the age of 10 and 24. So 24 is when adolescence actually ends. Biologically. Yep. And I wanted to know the story of a 10-year-old girl, because that would be our story. And so I really took that and revamped just the way that we looked. We were templated, captured ownership of our name across the internet, and just started speaking out, got involved. They were very afraid. We were in the MySpace era, or exiting the MySpace era. They were very afraid of social media because you see what people have done with our name. And it's like, no, I see what you haven't done with your name. That's what I see.
Yeah.
And so it was me taking a lot of for-profit missives and ways of marketing and situating strategy and content, and applying that as a top layer across the Girls Inc. that we operated. Right.
Excellent.
Yeah.
You were you were learning SEO early.
Yeah, I was about to say the same thing.
There are a lot of things that are going on now that I will tell you, the reason why I say the most brilliant folks I've ever worked with are the folks that I've worked with at Time Warner. And, 16, 17 years later, I'm still connected to a lot of those people, is because we were doing a lot of things that we simply just didn't, we didn't know what to call it. Right. Yeah. And so people are doing it now, and they're calling it whatever they're calling it. I'm like, oh, we've been doing that. Like click to buy, like, oh, we were doing that. We were just a media company, and we weren't really focused on manifesting the technology in a way that says who invented, who owned this. We just had brilliant people that made it work for our media properties.
Yeah. I actually wanted to ask you a question, Adrienne, about the Girls Inc., right?
Yeah.
So being that was your first role as a CEO, right? Like you came in there, you had great ideas, you knew they were struggling branding wise, but what was the biggest challenge specifically in that role? And how did you choose what thing to tackle first, or what problem to tackle first?
I think always the biggest challenge is making sure that you capture all the voices so that you make the right decisions. And with an organization that is nonprofit, that is effectively funded by a public, and usually an affinity-based public, you don't have the same amount of time that you do at a large Fortune 100, like a Time Warner or a Facebook, to acculturate what are those voices saying, who are those voices, and really do the full-on listening tour. So I think what was most difficult was getting folks to utilize the tools that I needed to utilize that effectively stood as my feet on the ground. So if I sent out a survey via SurveyMonkey and whatnot, it's just like, no, I really need you all to fill this out. So I think it was really just about getting folks technologically adapted to answering questions in order to make the best strategic and branding decisions for Girls Inc.
That makes tons of sense.
That's good. And I wanted to jump into something you said about Girls Inc. and about people being scared of social media. And it seems as though you weren't scared of social media because eventually you ended up at Facebook. And Jared was sharing that with me. How do you make the pivot from taking everything you learned at Girls Inc., which really it sounds like you innovated it a lot at Time Warner, fixed it at Girls Inc., and then moved over to Facebook to, I guess, fix another marketing problem, perhaps?
I don't know that Facebook has as many marketing problems as they have a lot of marketing to do. They have to have an allegiance to many advertisers. So you're absolutely right. In going from the Fortune 100 for-profit media space at Time Warner, I took a lot of the for-profit missives into Girls Inc. And then, I was awarded for that. I won the 40 Under 40 award. People saw that I had a passion around women and girls. Yep. And so people in the media space that were looking to leverage either from an advertising standpoint or from a media production standpoint, women and girls and gender, those are the people who reached out to me. So that's how I ended up at Zinio. And once I ended up at Zinio, that's all media all the time. And it put me in the realm of being really, really focused and obsessed with technology. And social media really is just the embarking and the particling of content, by unique non-public people. Whereas media that I worked in is really about more public people, public figures in business, public figures in entertainment. So I didn't find it to be that much different. Audience segmentation is, and knowing who your audience is and what it is you need to deliver to each of them, knowing how to curate the data and having the means and resources in which to curate the data is what Zinio accustomed me to. And so by virtue of that, it was very, very easy for me to springboard into other roles at Diageo, become a CMO in the AI and software as a service space, eventually do consulting, and then end up working for Facebook. At Facebook, I worked in global industry marketing. Who are the top 25 advertisers at Facebook? How do they translate? What do they want to say across Facebook platforms in different countries? The messaging isn't the same. The risk is not the same. What you have to manage and mitigate in the way of content is not the same. And so that was my role.
True.
That requires you to be very open-minded, because you understand that in America, what we think is funny and okay and appropriate from a messaging perspective, if you go to perhaps Johannesburg with a similar message, you could really make a mistake for yourself. Whether it's a visual mistake, a word mistake, anything, even positioning of items. So it's pretty cool that you've been able to do that.
I like that you bring up Africa, but I'm going to leave South Africa and I'm going to deal with Ghana, because
I was going to say Ghana, but I didn't want to be like on the nose.
You'd be so on the nose, because at Diageo, I ran into a scenario where it was, like I said, it's about how do you manage or mitigate risk, right? So at Diageo, it was more about, all right, we do things this way in America. But how do we need to do these things in a place like Ghana? What do we share with them to say these are best practices? Do we have a cultural lens over Ghana as Americans looking in to say, well, this is what we do, but we have an appreciation, or better yet, not even we have an appreciation. It's what do you do in Ghana? How is your culture different? So in working with folks in another country, it's really about managing risk. We as Americans are big on mitigating risk, putting things that stop us from being able to do certain things. Whereas if you go into other global cultures, it's really about managing to what from a moral standpoint or from a sustainability standpoint you may have issue with. I remember speaking to an executive about sustainability with Guinness Stout bottles. The bottles are the same everywhere in the country, everywhere in the world, right? These famous dark Guinness Stout bottles. And we were having a conversation about recycling and doing advertising around recycling and sustainability, and how those bottles are heavy, right? You could do some damage with a Guinness bottle, right? Yeah. Super heavy bottles. So, he talked to me about, in some places in Ghana, he's like, people just throw their trash out the window
Mm-hmm.
right along the side of their houses, right? So how do we translate this message of recycling and sustainability into a country where they just throw it outside the window and expect it to dissolve into the, you know, into the ground, and or they don't necessarily think about it because they don't have the same disposal systems and definitely not the same recycling systems in certain parts of the country that we do. So yeah, it's you gotta know how to play and what your game is, but you have to be a really, really good listener about culture and the way folks do things in order to execute well as a marketer.
Do you think that being a woman of color, both a woman and a woman, more sensitive to those differences globally?
I think there are places where it's incredibly welcomed, right? So you know, perception is created by media oftentimes in terms of what folks tend to think about us, and it's whether it's, you know, the West, but more than anything else, you have to know that as any gender, whether you are a Black woman or someone says the total opposite as a white man, that there's a perception and ambassadors for you that you haven't chosen, and that's dominated by advertising and media. So me as a woman, never mind that I'm Black, as a woman and as a human being, I react to the fact that folks are subject to a lot of messaging that allows them to preconceive who it is that I'm going to show up as. So I've had instances where people are incredibly pleased in Athens, Greece, you know, to see me and have me in the room, and you'd think I was the Queen of Sheba arriving, right? And then I've had instances where I am the one in the room here in the United States, and I'm interviewing a young white man, and he walks in the room and takes the head of the table, making the assumption that I'm not her, that I'm the assistant, right? That happened to me at BOMO when I was recruiting for our sales and marketing team. So I will tell you that I think it always makes a difference because we're all quite visual. We all have perceptions that come from media, but initially start at home. And so understanding that is critical, and not taking anything personally is critical to actually being able to come in, represent yourself, represent your business and brand, and get the job done.
Nice.
Yeah. And I actually had a question too, Adrienne, about Diageo, right? So at Diageo, you introduced their first supplier diversity program, driving like 18 million in new business, right? So You're a CMO. And how did you get the company to buy into that initiative? And what are some things minority-owned agencies like ourselves can do to make sure they're on the radar for a company like Diageo?
So I was looking at net sales volumes in governance every month, sometimes twice a month. And those meetings at one point became brutal, like where folks could not articulate why they weren't producing the volume results that were originally projected or that a performer said that they should be able to produce.
Yeah.
And so going to each unique business director and going to each unique brand VP and peeling back the layers, it was, you know, I don't want you to ask me for more money. I'm not gonna fill your funnel with more money. I need to understand exactly what your marketing is. I don't want to see line items on a P&L. I want to see a statement of work. I want to understand what's behind these line items. Yeah. So I'm very much a roll up your sleeve type of executive. And I credit Girls Inc. with that. You know, I credit Girls Inc. with that because while I had 26 people reporting to me, every single person had to roll up their sleeves to understand how they were executing for that organization.
Right.
And so some folks were taken aback by that, but what it revealed to me was that there was no multicultural marketing was not a line item. Right. So we talked a little bit about Guinness and, you know, how it would be different in terms of marketing and messaging in places like Ghana. But here in the US, it was just, there was certain assumptions that, well, you know, we don't need to market vodka to Mexicans, or Hispanic people only drink, you know, beer.
Oh, yeah.
And tequila, right? So all these very, very basic assumptions. And with those basic assumptions, even if you assume that, why are you not talking to them? Why aren't you marketing to them?
Yeah.
So the reason they weren't marketing to them was because of the presence of AORs, agencies of record, and the likelihood of these agencies of record being one-trick ponies and doing what they've always done.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm a disruptor. And I said, okay, so this isn't going to work, and no one's allowed to ask me for any more money. We need to brief agencies, and you all need to come up with, briefs for multicultural marketing.
Right.
Because you're leaving a lot on the table by effectively ignoring this consumer.
Yep.
And what it ended up being was that once I said that, I realized that folks were really excited and gung-ho about doing that. But it was more about, that only occurs in branded entertainment, which is another area that I served. And so, we can have Little John the rapper, and we can have this one and that one, and Crown Royal, and of course we had Diddy, Sean Combs, in partnership with Ciroc. And that's been a very long-standing partnership. And so folks thought, okay, well, we're doing that already. And we weren't effectively doing that.
Yeah.
So I went to the then CEO of North America, a gentleman named Larry Schwartz, who's now retired from Diageo, and said to him that they're not doing any multicultural marketing because they don't have anyone who can do it.
Right.
And I wasn't talking about the in-house talent. I was talking about the agencies.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And I said, so we need to do something about that. And he says, oh, so you want to get in procurement's way. And I was like, I absolutely need procurement in the room. Mm-hmm. And so what we ultimately ended up doing was devising that anytime you were pitching any agency for any business, and not just something that could be skewed as multicultural,
Mm-hmm.
that you needed to have a minority-led and operated agency in the room. That was my rule. And so you needed to give them the opportunities, the space and time for equity. If we're going to achieve brand equity, you need to start at the very beginning with the creators and with your agencies. And so as an effective result of that, Larry Schwartz invested $1 million in me. And I was able to take on the National Minority Supplier Diversity Council. I went out and I was effectively the public voice of what Diageo wanted to do. I found out about the $1 billion roundtable, which entities like Johnson & Johnson and Clorox belong to. Mm-hmm. And while we are a different type of CPG and a luxury product provider, when you think about wines and spirits that are non-necessity, but certainly utilize hopefully for the celebration of life achievements and things of that nature, and the communion of friends and family in a healthy fashion, in a responsible fashion. Larry said, Adrienne, you're looking to do a Rooney Rule. And then he said, you know what that is? And I was like, who's your team? Mm-hmm. Right? Because I'm a Patriots fan, still am. Mm-hmm. He was a Giants fan, and we laughed about it, and that's how it happened. He said, what do you need to get this done? So I presented him with effectively an internal business unit plan. Right. And I crafted the right relationships between agency procurement and our marketing teams. And within about, I would say 13 months, we had generated $18 million in new business because we had PR agencies, we had a branded entertainment agency, we had production agencies, we had creative agencies, and individual consultants that were representative of the non-majority.
Yeah. Yep. And the funny thing about it, and I mean, from a capitalist perspective, I don't understand why folks don't understand it. If you open the door and let different minds in, you're just going to potentially make more money.
Right.
And that it's provable. It continues to be provable.
Absolutely. And so the second part of your question, Jared, how am I a smaller, as people would say, minority-led. And I struggle with the word minority because I'm not sure what that means. But other than white, right? when a business, a small or medium owned business that is other than white run and white owned, predominantly white run and white owned, gets in, the way that they get in, and the way, and I used to sit with agencies, even myself, like legitimately saying, you've got to be legitimate. You've got to be a legitimate. You want to play in the space of these big Fortune 100, Fortune 20 companies, Fortune 20 CPGs. You want to play in that space. You want to be a vendor or a partner to them. You want to provide services to them. You have to legitimize your business. So I definitely had instances where we, put it out there in the trade. We utilize the trade organizations like WeBank. We utilize the National Gay and Lesbian groups for small businesses. We utilize the Hispanic Chamber of Commerce. We utilize the Black Chamber of Commerce and the National Minority Supplier Diversity Council. Mm-hmm. And we said to them, send them to us. But the struggle, when you peel back that layer in that relationship, the struggle they had was some of the folks who were looking to be sent had not legitimized their businesses. Not filing your taxes, don't have an official tax ID, you're using somebody else's business name, you want to operate as a DBA. So like at the end of the day, it's a come to Jesus moment. It's like, let's be honest with ourselves. Do we really want to do business? Because you can be incredibly talented and the best at what it is you do and better than the best at doing it. But at the end of the day, you need to legitimize your business so that when the door is open, you can get set up and it's not an issue.
Yeah.
The other thing is to be aware because when you do get in the door, sometimes you're small. An organization with, say, 30 people that may do, $3 million, $6 million worth of business a year is an organization that can't do the whole, you wait 90 days for us to pay you. No. They've got employees to pay with families to feed. So what I did was I partnered with my finance officer and I said, we're a self-insured organization. This organization was making at the time $73 billion a year globally. We're a self-insured organization. Now that we've opened the door to small, medium, and owned minority businesses, how do we make sure that they can actually play with us? Because this 90-day pay thing doesn't work for a small business, for any small business.
Yeah.
And he says, well, I don't know what you're suggesting. The rules are the rules. And I said, the rules are made to be changed. Why do we receive service and have an entity that's a small business wait 90 days to get paid? They're paying their employees. That's what's happening here. And so I said to him, I looked at my corporate card, and my corporate card wasn't an Amex, it was Citibank. Mm-hmm. I said, what is the nature of this relationship? And he said, what? I said, what's the nature of our relationship with Citibank? Mm-hmm. Citibank has to be able to do something because we spend billions of dollars with them for travel and entertainment. It's Diageo, man. How can they be deeper integrated into what we do as a business beyond T&E? And he scratched his head. And in the meantime, I had already been doing some research on, supplier diversity and the different means of financing. So we got Citibank to come up with a 10-day preferred vendor financing. So you, Jared, have a company. You did some business for us. You've done PR for us, and you have a creative agency, Chantel, and you're doing all of our creative for our out of home. And you're submitting your bills and waiting 90 days. And I said, that's too much. That's too much. Sometimes it's just Chantel by herself, and she's just that good.
Right.
Yeah.
And so I effectively ended up with the finance group curating and creating a supplier financing schematic that you submit your invoice, and with a 5% deduction, we pay you in 10 days.
Did that make you more popular?
Very popular. Very popular because then you have whispers down the lane, right? Mm-hmm. And so the organization that is now, I think, 6 going into 7 years old, that is fully a supplier diversity organization, is an organization that's demand side. It's marketing side.
Yeah.
It's the hardest side. It's super easy for the indirect side, the office services, office furniture, building services, for those to be minority owned and led and operated. Super easy. But the thing that the consumer sees and touches wasn't. And now you will see more of that from Diageo. They're doing a really, really good job. So that was my parting legacy. So my recommendation is to get into everybody's business, but legitimize yourself as a small business owner and be consistent in your branding as well.
Yeah. Well, great points, Adrienne. I know I didn't even realize we went over. I got like 2-3 other questions I want to ask. I'm not sure to tell, but I just wanted to say thank you again, Adrienne, for taking the time. Like, this is, you dropped some gems. It was definitely inspiring to hear, some of the ins and outs of what you did and some of the things you've implemented. Right. I think the biggest takeaway for me is the fact that you were able to disrupt and you were able to go to the CEO like Larry Schwartz, right, and bring up new ideas where other people might have been like, I don't really want to do that, right? Or what if this fails? Or any of those things. You took the risk and it's really paid off, and that's inspiring to me. So I appreciate you sharing those stories.
And we have to have you come back and talk about
definitely,
or Absolutely. We have to connect and talk about globalization, because I don't often hear people say they love talking about it. So,
Chantel, all I can say is we better start talking about it. We better start talking about it. It's the way I can best describe globalization for those of us who are myopic is, well, it's 3 hours earlier in California, right? But it's 6 hours later in London. So knowing that is key, that the world is operating at a speed that is not yours. And we all need to figure out how we catch up. And that's the key to globalization.
It's true. True. Well, I want to thank you so much for your time, Adrienne. This was a great pleasure. Jared, you're amazing.
Likewise, Queen. Likewise.
Jared, wrap it up.
Yeah, no, we're gonna do it. But thank you again, Adrienne. Thank you for all the people who who've joined in. We're on episode 34 on Thursday with Chris Walker, and we'll have some clips out for you guys later in the week. And thank you again, Adrienne. We'll definitely get you back. And thank you for everything you've done for me.
You're very welcome. Take good care, guys. Have a great afternoon.
Have a great one. Take care.